The world has witnessed disturbing extremes. In 1978, over 900 followers of Jim Jones died after drinking cyanide-laced Kool-Aid in Jonestown, Guyana. In 1997, 39 members of the Heaven's Gate cult committed mass suicide in California, believing they'd ascend to an alien spacecraft. In Japan, the Aum Shinrikyo cult carried out a deadly sarin gas attack in the Tokyo subway in 1995, killing 13 and injuring thousands. These acts of blind faith, driven by charismatic leaders and doomsday prophecies, have become grim milestones in our understanding of cultism. But the danger is not confined to distant lands or history books. Today we examine not one, not two, but three of the most devastating cult tragedies in African history. Events that unfolded with chilling similarity across two nations, Uganda and Kenya, and left over 1,000 people dead. This is the story of the movement for the restoration of the Ten Commandments of God in Uganda, the Good News International Church in Kenya, and the Migori cult case in Kenya. You may have heard of the Shakahola Forest Massacre in Kenya in 2023. But did you know that 2 decades earlier in Uganda, an eerily similar event occurred? And in the months following Shakahola, yet another secretive religious sect surfaced in Migori County, Kenya, echoing the same deadly patterns? Stay with us and make sure to comment your thoughts as we go. This is a difficult, emotional journey, but one we must take together. Before we begin, this video is for educational purposes only. We aim to explore the tragic and complex stories of religious cultism in Africa with the utmost respect to the victims, their families, and the communities affected. Our intention is not to sensationalize, but to inform, to remember, and to spark conversation about how such events came to pass and how they might be prevented in the future. If you or someone you know has been affected by cult-related trauma, please seek help. And if you're watching this to better understand the dangers of high-control religious groups, you're in the right place. In the year 2000, in the lush, rolling hills of Uganda, that light was extinguished for hundreds. What began as a peaceful religious movement spiraled into one of the most devastating cult tragedies in African history. More than 700 people would die, burned alive, poisoned, or buried in shallow graves. Their crime? Believing in the end of the world and following a man who promised to save them. This is the story of the movement for the restoration of the Ten Commandments of God. The story of a massacre that shook the nation and of the deadly power that unchecked belief can hold. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Uganda was a nation rebuilding. After years of war and political turmoil, many people sought meaning in religion. Amid that spiritual hunger, a group emerged. It was led by a former government official, Joseph Kibwetere, and a charismatic ex-nun named Credonia Morinde. Together, they founded the Movement for the Restoration of the Ten Commandments of God. They claimed to have received visions from the Virgin Mary. Their core message was simple but urgent. The world would end on December 31st, 1999. Followers were told to purify themselves, abstain from sex, fasting, abandon material possessions, and above all, obey the Ten Commandments with absolute devotion. Even speaking could be considered sinful. They communicated through sign language or written notes. The group grew rapidly. Former Catholics, Protestants, and skeptics alike flocked to their cause. At its peak, the movement had more than 5,000 followers spread across southwestern Uganda. They lived communally. Their schools and farms operated independently. They wore green uniforms, marched in silence, and prepared for what they believed was the imminent apocalypse. But when the year 2000 came and went, with no apocalypse, the movement began to fracture. Members started questioning the leaders. Doubt spread. People wanted their money back. They wanted their lives back. That's when things turned deadly. On March 17, 2000, the group held what they called a farewell feast at their headquarters in Kanungu district. It was a Friday. Over 500 followers gathered. They sang hymns, drank soda, and ate roasted meat, rare luxuries in their ascetic lifestyle. Then, without warning, the church was locked from the outside. A massive explosion tore through the building. Fire engulfed the wooden structure. Screams echoed through the hills. When police arrived the next day, they found a charred church, with hundreds of bodies stacked inside. Most were burned beyond recognition. The exits had been nailed shut, the windows barricaded. It was not a suicide. It was murder. As investigators began to unravel the case, they found more mass graves at other properties owned by the cult. Bodies of men, women, and children, some poisoned, others strangled, were uncovered across southwestern Uganda. By April 2000, the death toll had surpassed 778. It remains one of the deadliest cult-related massacres in world history. At first, authorities believed the cult leaders had perished in the fire, but soon suspicions grew. Witnesses reported seeing Credonia Marinda and other top leaders leave the compound before the explosion. Their bodies were never found. Interpol issued international arrest warrants for the surviving leaders. Rumors circulated they had fled to the Democratic Republic of Congo or even Europe. To this day, their whereabouts remain unknown. Joseph Kibweteri, the group's spiritual figurehead, was either killed by the leadership or vanished alongside them. His fate is still unconfirmed. The Ugandan government faced harsh criticism for failing to intervene earlier. Reports later revealed that local officials had been warned months before the massacre. Families had reported disappearances, but little action was taken. The Kanungu massacre left an indelible scar on Uganda. For survivors and relatives of the victims, the pain remains fresh. Many lost entire families, children, spouses, siblings, all in a single day. The tragedy also forced the Ugandan government to re-examine its policies on religious registration and regulation. But enforcement has remained lax. Dozens of fringe religious groups still operate in remote parts of the country. Meanwhile, the movement's teachings persist in small, underground pockets. Cultism in Uganda did not die in 2000. It simply changed form. In the years since, Uganda has seen other destructive sects emerge, but none have matched the scale and horror of Kanungu. Why would hundreds of people willingly give up their lives? What would compel parents to bring their children into a burning church? The answers lie in desperation, manipulation, and blind faith. The cult targeted the vulnerable, the poor, the uneducated, those disillusioned by the chaos of Uganda's past. It offered clarity, purpose, certainty. The leaders were persuasive. They promised eternal life, salvation. They wrapped control in the language of prophecy. By the time doubt crept in, it was too late. Members who tried to leave were threatened. Some disappeared. The cult became a prison of the mind, and eventually of the body. The story of the movement for the restoration of the 10 Commandments of God is not just a Ugandan story, it is a global warning. A warning about the power of unchecked authority, about how easily hope can be twisted into horror. Hundreds died believing they were going to heaven. In recent years, Kenya, a country known for its rich culture and vibrant faith, has found itself in the global spotlight for the wrong reasons. It began with a tip. On April 13, 2023, Kenyan police received a report that people were dying in the Shakahola Forest of Kilifi County. What they found was worse than anyone could have imagined. Buried in shallow graves beneath the forest floor were bodies, hundreds of them, men, women, and children who had been told to starve themselves to death. Why? To meet Jesus. Investigators quickly discovered that this was no ordinary religious gathering gone wrong. It was a systematic operation of death. Followers of a religious sect had willingly, or under coercion, fasted to death, believing that earthly suffering would grant them divine salvation. The forest, spanning over 800 acres, had become a mass graveyard. Over the next few weeks, the Kenyan Red Cross and police unearthed more than 400 bodies. Forensic teams revealed causes of death: starvation, strangulation, blunt force trauma. Among the dead were at least 191 children. Many of the bodies were emaciated beyond recognition. Some were buried in groups. Others showed signs of violence, indicating they may have resisted or tried to flee. In some cases, they were forced to fast. Others were buried alive. Victims had been silenced not only physically but mentally, trapped in the belief that death was their only salvation. The public was horrified, but the question remained, who was behind it all? The answer pointed to a man named Paul Mackenzie. A former taxi driver turned televangelist, Mackenzie had founded the Good News International Church. He preached an extreme form of Christian fundamentalism, denouncing education, healthcare, and government institutions. His followers were told the world would end, and the only path to salvation was total surrender and eventual death. He had been arrested multiple times before, but never held accountable. This time it was different. Mackenzie was arrested along with dozens of his associates. Charges included terrorism, murder, manslaughter, and child abuse. He remains in custody, facing trial in one of the largest criminal investigations in Kenyan history. But how had this been allowed to happen? Weren't there warning signs? Indeed, there were. In 2017, Mackenzie was first arrested for promoting radical doctrines that encouraged children to drop out of school. He was arrested again in 2019, but both times he was released. There were whispers of corruption, of local officials turning a blind eye, and of a legal system too slow or unwilling to confront religious exploitation. And so, the cult thrived. By the time the authorities acted in 2023, it was too late. Hundreds were already dead. 600 kilometers away. In the small village of Opapo, Migori County, western Kenya, locals began to whisper of strange happenings at a compound known as Melchio St. Joseph Mission of Messiah Church. It had existed for decades, founded in the 1990s by a man who called himself a messianic figure. After his death nearly a decade ago, followers continued his teachings in seclusion. They lived apart from the community. Children didn't attend school, followers refused medical care, and something even more disturbing: no one ever seemed to leave. On April 21, 2025, police, acting on reports from concerned residents, raided the compound. What they found mirrored the horrors of Shakahola, on a smaller but equally chilling scale. 2 decomposing bodies were discovered on the church premises. One was buried in a shallow grave. The other lay in a locked room, dressed in ceremonial robes. The deceased had been buried without proper documentation, in secret. But that wasn't all. 57 individuals, weak, malnourished, and deeply indoctrinated, were found inside the compound. Many refused help. Some sang hymns as they were removed by authorities. A few had to be hospitalized. None of them had seen a doctor or gone to school in years. Among the dead was a former General Service Unit officer, Dan Ayu Obura, who had reportedly come to the church seeking healing. He never left. His family had been misled about his burial and were later horrified to learn he'd been buried in secret by church members. The police arrested 4 suspects tied to the church's leadership. The church itself, investigators revealed, wasn't even registered as a religious institution. It was a company, legally dodging regulatory oversight. As word spread, more locals came forward. They spoke of years of isolation, mind control, and whispers of more hidden graves. They spoke of children being raised without birth certificates, of women forbidden from leaving, and of prayers being held for days over dead bodies in hopes of resurrection. Investigations are still ongoing. The full extent of what happened in Opapo is yet to be revealed. 2 haunting stories, separated by geography but connected by ideology, have revealed the deadly reach of religious extremism in Kenya. First came the massacre in Shakahola Forest. Then, eerily, a similar pattern began to unfold in a quiet village in Migori County. These are not stories of faith. They are stories of fear, manipulation, and unchecked power. Stories that demand to be told, not just for their shock value, but for the lives that were lost, the lives still hanging in the balance, and the urgent need for accountability in how religion operates in unregulated spaces. Two different regions, two different churches, two disturbingly similar outcomes. The Shakahola Forest and the Migori compound are not anomalies. They are symptoms of a broader problem, one that stretches beyond Kenya, across the continent, and into the dark corners of unchecked religious extremism. And we combine these three cases, Shakahola, Kanungu, and Migori, not to overwhelm you, but to show you the terrifying consistency in how cults operate. Across borders, languages, and decades, they use the same blueprint: control through fear, isolation from loved ones, promises of divine favor, punishment for doubt, and most tragically, the erasure of innocent lives. These are not just African stories. They are human stories, and remembering them honors those we lost. We remember the children who never got to grow up, the parents who believed they were saving their families, the survivors living with trauma and questions, and the relatives still grieving, still waiting for justice. To all those affected, you are not forgotten. Faith has long been humanity's guiding light. It builds community, offers hope, and often makes sense of a senseless world. But what happens when faith is weaponized, turned inward against its believers? In Kenya, like in many countries, religion is deeply respected. But that respect can become dangerous when it blinds us to abuse. After Shakahola, President William Ruto admitted state failure. A task force was created to regulate religious groups. But critics argue it came too late, and that enforcement remains weak. The country's constitution guarantees freedom of religion. But how do you balance freedom with accountability? How do you protect belief while preventing harm? What drives people to give up their lives, their families, their health, all for a promise of salvation? Experts point to several factors like poverty. Many cults prey on the poor, offering hope. Literacy. Lack of education makes people more vulnerable to manipulation. Charismatic leaders. They offer certainty in an uncertain world. Weak regulation. Few checks exist on what religious groups can preach. Isolation. Cults thrive when members are cut off from outside information. These environments create the perfect storm. Once inside, followers are subjected to fear, love bombing, doctrinal purity, and emotional blackmail. Leaving feels like betrayal, not just of the group, but of God. The most dangerous cults aren't just those who speak of God, they're the ones who say only they speak for God. Are these isolated incidents or symptoms of something deeper? Poverty, lack of mental health services, spiritual desperation? Comment below. What do you think drives people to join cults? And what responsibility do governments and communities have? If this video moved you, please like this video to support the channel. Subscribe. For more deep dives into true crime and untold stories, click the notification bell so you don't miss the next video. And most importantly, comment below. What did you learn from this? What would you do if someone close to you joined a dangerous group? What case should we cover next? Let's keep this conversation going. Share on this video to raise awareness. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, take care. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.